My name is Nithyananda. I'm a monastic member of Kailasa, the first nation for Hindus, led by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Jagadguru Mahasanghidanam, His Divine Holiness Bhagwan Sri Nithyananda Paramashivam. I came from a highly educated professional background, like many of us in Kailasa. We had successful, happy lives, established careers, bright futures. But inspired by the extraordinary vision, compassion, and global humanitarian contribution of the SPH, we made a conscious decision to give up everything, our careers, our comforts, our worldly life, and dedicate ourselves fully to the spiritual path and to the mission of serving humanity. This is who we are: peaceful, spiritual, non-violent, dedicated to serving others. But today, I'm speaking because everything beautiful we built, everything spiritual the SPH gave us, was brutally destroyed, not by law, not by justice, but by a dangerous propaganda article from the New York Times. To the New York Times, you called us fake, you called it a land grab, you called our guru a fugitive. Every word a lie, every line a weapon of hate. What you wrote isn't journalism, it's propaganda, it's incitement, it's a modern-day Hindu-phobic attack on 2 billion Hindus. The New York Times called Kailasa fake. Kailasa is not a claim, it's a reality. Under Article 1 of the Montevideo Convention, a nation is defined by a permanent population, a defined territory, a functioning government, and capacity to enter into relations with other nations. Kailasa fulfills all 4. Sovereign lands have been granted by indigenous nations and spiritual communities in multiple countries as a gesture of deep respect for the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism and his revival of Sanatana Hindu Dharma. Kailasa is not a nation of war, a nation of violence. Kailasa is a nation of service, a nation of compassion, a nation built only to give. And here's what it looks like in action. 1 billion free Sattvic organic meals served across temples, analayas, mobile kitchens, and disaster zones. 70 plus free healthcare centers and mobile clinics providing Ayurvedic, Siddha, and allopathy care, including maternal health, mental wellness, and chronic disease treatment, all 100% free. 100,000 plus children give free education and spiritual guidance through Kailasa's Gurukul and online learning platforms. Disaster relief in 16 plus countries, from pandemic response to refugee aid, food security, and women's empowerment. Kailasa is a spiritual service-based sovereign nation grounded in non-violence, ahimsa, human rights, gender equality, religious freedom, and the preservation of ancient indigenous knowledge systems. It's recognized by community-to-community diplomacy, has hosted over 1,000 plus interfaith events, and engaged with global forums, including UN-related bodies and side events. And every service, food, education, health, spiritual empowerment, has been offered freely without expectations, without discrimination. All free, all peaceful, all spiritual service to humanity. And you call that fake? The fugitive lie. You call the SPH a fugitive? Let's talk about the truth you didn't want the world to know. Yes, the SPH was illegally arrested twice in India. And the very photo you, the New York Times, used in your article, that is not a photo of a criminal. That's a photo of a Hindu spiritual leader illegally arrested, persecuted by nothing but fearlessly reviving Hinduism. Over the last 20 plus years, the SPH has faced hate speech, delegitimization, global defamation, false charges, media propaganda, character assassination, and a brutal campaign of Hindu-phobia. And yet, after all that, the courts of law have spoken. Every false case filed against the SPH in India, quashed. the SPH had been exonerated by both the Indian courts and the US courts. In fact, the US court didn't just declare the SPH innocent, they exposed the entire case as malicious and fabricated. The perpetrators, they were ordered to pay nearly $500,000 US in penalties and damages for fraud, defamation, and malicious persecution. That's not my opinion. That's the official judgment of the US federal court. And what about Interpol? Even Interpol, the world's highest police organization, refused to issue any blue corner notice or red corner notice on the SPH. Why? Because the accusations couldn't stand international legal scrutiny. Because the world can see this for what it really is, a politically motivated religious persecution. The SPH is not a fugitive. The SPH is one of the world's most respected, most followed spiritual leaders. His real crime, feeding the poor, educating the neglected, reviving Hinduism fearlessly. The SPH is the most viewed and most followed spiritual leader on the internet today. Over 1+ billion views online, over 30 million followers, over 10,000 hours of live teachings, daily guidance streamed in 100+ countries in 18+ languages. All of this built only on truth, spiritual strength, and global service. Not on corporate PR, not on political power, not on a billion-dollar media machine. So tell me, New York Times, with all these facts in front of you, what gives you the right to label an exonerated, internationally respected Hindu spiritual leader a fugitive? This is not journalism. This is propaganda, and the world is watching. The deportation lie. In your article, the New York Times claimed that we, the Kailasa volunteers, were deported back to our home countries. That is absolutely false. As one of the 18 female victims, including a pregnant lady and a minor child, I'm here to tell you the truth. We were not deported. We were kidnapped. We were terrorized. We were tortured. And we were violently thrown out at the border like criminals, without dignity, without process, without basic humanity. None of the 18 female Hindu volunteers in Bolivia signed any part of the agreement that you, New York Times, falsely reported. We were not legal parties. We had no ownership, no claim, no involvement in any agreement. We were there on valid visas for voluntary cultural exchange and humanitarian service, in full compliance with Bolivian immigration law, and still immigration and police officers came for us, heavily armed, threatening peaceful women like terrorists. March 21st to 22nd, 2025, terror in Santa Cruz. 20 to 30 heavily armed officers stormed our peaceful residence. No warrant, phones seized, no food, no water, no access to lawyers. Coerced to sign Spanish documents under threats, including minor child and pregnant woman, detained 18 hours and traumatized.
No, this is Bolivia immigration. No, the immigration staff take our phone. This is Bolivia immigration. They took our phone. They took our phone and they hold the gun, come in our room. They hold the gun in, come in our room.
Then we were already preparing to leave Bolivia voluntarily on March 22nd. Even Bolivian immigration gave us written confirmation, and we had 3 days to appeal. But we chose to leave on the same day peacefully. Even that, they didn't allow. 23rd to 24th, 2025, terror in La Paz International Airport. All of us were detained and closely watched by armed authorities right after our arrival. Our visas suddenly cancelled. 12 females, including pregnant lady, being kidnapped. And this wasn't in broad daylight. This was in the middle of the night, when we were exhausted, when we were vulnerable, when most of us were sleeping in the public waiting area of the airport.
The international media, you cannot force us. You cannot force us. There's no human right in Bolivia. You cannot force us. There's no human right in Bolivia. No, we are not leaving. No, we have flights. We have tickets. We are not leaving.
We are leaving.
No, you cannot force us. No, no, please don't touch. Don't touch. Don't touch. There's no, don't touch her. No, don't touch her. No, you're going on the international media. We're going to report you. No, don't touch her. No, don't touch her. No. No, don't touch. No, don't touch. No, no, no.
We were dragged out forcefully by dozens of male and female armed officers, thrown into vehicles, driven in complete darkness, and dumped like criminals at the freezing, isolated Peru-Bolivia border. It was freezing cold. We were left without food, without water, without any protection, without any idea where we were.
So we are 12 female. We didn't do anything wrong. They arrested us forcefully without any legal reason, without any legal paper, in public, when everyone saw them. They dared to do this with force. They grab our hands and legs, drag us out from the airport, and didn't tell us where they are going. We don't know where we are going. And I don't know how long I can go live. We are treated, we didn't do anything wrong in this country. They are treating us like the worst criminals. There's no legal right, there's no legal paper. They didn't show us any legal paper. Why they arrest us like this?
We were left vulnerable, helpless, and traumatized, stranded in the middle of the night in freezing weather, simply for being Hindus. This wasn't law enforcement. This was terror. This was kidnapping. This was state-sponsored persecution. New York Times, where was your report on the pregnant woman being detained and kidnapped? Where was your outrage about armed raids on peaceful unarmed monks? Where was your humanity when for 4 days we were illegally held, tortured, starved, and finally abandoned at the border like criminals for the only crime of being Hindus? Land grab lie, let's talk facts. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism was never in Bolivia. He never entered the country. He never met Bolivian government officials. He never signed any document or agreement. The collaboration agreement with indigenous nations, it was a legally valid cultural and humanitarian collaboration signed between a registered Hindu non-profit organization based in the United States and sovereign indigenous nations of Bolivia. The agreement was reviewed under multiple legal opinions, notarized, protocolized, and legally registered, fully compliant with Article 30 of the Bolivian Constitution, which guarantees autonomy and self-determination to indigenous nations. Consistent with ILO Convention 169, ratified by Bolivia, which recognized the right of indigenous peoples to enter agreements with international entities for cultural and social development. Protected under UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, affirming the right of indigenous peoples to maintain spiritual relationships with traditionally owned lands and form external alliances. Furthermore, under Bolivian law number 450 for the protection of indigenous nations and peoples, the agreement stands as a lawful collaboration respecting the customs, governance, and autonomy of indigenous nations, not a land grab. It's a collaboration between two ancient indigenous civilizations built on mutual respect and shared vision. It was their decision to work together, their free will, their sovereign right. But the New York Times twisted it into a land grab. That's not journalism. It's a blatant denial of indigenous agency and the continuation of the colonial mindset. The New York Times, your reporting is not just careless, it's dangerously biased, it's Hindu-phobic, it's inciting violence, and it is enabling genocide against 2 billion Hindus across the globe. We demand the immediate removal of every false, defamatory, Hindu-phobic article you have published about SPH, about Kailasa, and about our indigenous agreements. The immediate removal of your hate speech propaganda that fuels violence, genocide, and attacks against the Hindu worldwide. A public apology for the trauma, for the harassment, for the dehumanization, for the lies, and for the danger you have created for innocent Hindus. And this is not just a request. We will be taking strict legal action against the New York Times. We'll be suing you for every act of defamation, delegitimization, and incitement of hate you have published against us. Your lies do not go unanswered anymore. Your hate will be challenged legally, publicly, and globally. This media attack done by the New York Times is not just one spiritual nation. It is a war between the anti-Hindu deep state and Kailasa, the sovereign voice of 2 billion Hindus who demand their right to exist, to thrive, and to worship freely. You can distort the headlines. You can silence our voices, but you cannot erase the truth. Kailasa is real, and it is here to stay. The real question the world must ask is, why is Kailasa under attack? Because we are the unapologetic voice of 2 billion Hindus, because we are reviving indigenous dharma, free from colonial control, because a peaceful spiritual Hindu nation is the one thing the Hindu-phobic deep state cannot control. And you, New York Times, you chose to stand on the wrong side of history. Nithyananda.